Okay, babies. What's up, G babies? What's up, all you AI users? What's up, all you Chat GPT babies? This is why am I doing this? This is from where are we at here? Okay, 108, and we're gonna go for at least another hour. And timer's already started, so yeah, picking up where we left off, we're going for it. All right, so let's do this. This is where we had stopped. We need to alter the below send so that it sends both client and game ID. So what we need to do, we have to add in code that calculates include logic that, well, the client num or the game ID already gets calculated, and the client num already gets incremented, right? So the client num would get incremented up into a certain point. I think currently the way that it works is client thread, or whenever we call the client thread function, we pass the current player int. Current player int currently only scales up to 2, and that is what we convert. Don't we convert the client num to be the self client num, or did we not add that? Let's see. I added this, unsure if proper review, update review. Okay, so we didn't actually add that line in. I think what we'll do is at the top of this, right up here, we'll say, well, wait, no, yeah, so this was the whole point, right? The point was we don't want to change this. We want this to always be in terms of 1 or 2. So we actually don't want to refer to the self client num. We want a converted client num. So like we would actually not pass in the client num, but instead we would pass in, well, we wouldn't pass in anything at all, because we would be updating the actual self client num attribute, which means that we would just pass the self into this function, and then at the beginning of this function we would have code that we'll say, what do we want to call this? We'll have like a little title for this. We'll call it client num mod. Yeah, we'll call adder mod. We'll just call it that. We'll just give it a little name, and that will let us know whenever we use this prefix, that's what we're talking about. I think that's a good idea. And we'll say, why did it do that? Oh man. Oh man. What happened? Oh man. Let's try this again. Oh, you got fast at typing, boy. Oh, you got fast at typing, baby. Let's see if it's working, dog, because it cut out on us and oh man. Let's try this. All right, there it is. Oh yeah, it's round 2, dude. Round 2, boy. For the day. And there it goes. Alright, there it is. Whoa, 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 whoa. Alright, we're back at it. I want this again, because I just like it. Okay, oh, the heater, it's got warm in here again. I gotta turn the heater off, dude. Oh, shit. I'm getting old, bro. I can't bend over without making noises and stuff. Okay, yeah, so there, we're back set up. So we have client num adder mod. We will need to implement code that converts self client num, which will need to implement code that converts self client num, which will be set, or which will be incremented and assigned in probably start accepting clients instead of incrementing using current player ends. Either that or we will increment. We could just increment the client num alongside it. So client num always incrementing +1 every time. Yeah, so that was way like extra. This, damn it, so need to do like this. Like code that converts self client num always increments every new client new connection. Be 1, 3 to 5 to 6, etc. To a corresponding client num that is always 1 or 2. I know that is always 1 or 2. Could use a function that's the client num, or we could create another calculated property we did with game ID. So honestly, probably would use calculated property option. I think that would be our best bet, baby. Okay, so we could use a function that converts this kind of number. We could create another calculated property like we did with self game ID. Probably would use calculated property option. So yeah, this would actually remain the same. We just need to add code that converts the client num. So couldn't we just change this to be like local client num? Because we already have self client num, so we'd have to use a different namespace. Well, okay, actually, we would have client ID and then client num, which are different, right? We have client ID and then client num. So let's go up here. We'll create this new client. We'll have client num, but we're also gonna have client ID. Client ID, baby. Client ID, client num. Okay, now client ID is going to be different. So, okay, so this is actually going to be and actually, just to be even more specific, this would be client num 1 or 2. So there's no confusion. You know what I mean? Because client num versus client ID, the namespaces are too similar. So what we're going to do, we're going to change this to be, let's see, self client num first of all. And we're going to change this to be self dot to actually be client ID. Purpose number assigned to each client form of client connection. Yeah, that is actually what this. So we have, which doesn't use self client now. This is going to be changed to client ID. Need to modify associated logic in this file, which doesn't use self client now. I think it's in threaded client or preceding function. We'll need to implement code that converts self client ID. Yeah, so this would be changed. Okay, got it. Alright, what is this? This is game ID based on the current value of client num, right? So this is going to be based off of client ID now instead. Okay, cool. So we took care of that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new one up here. We're going to create client num 1 or 2, baby. Right here. We're going to do self dot, okay. And then this is going to be well, I guess like we'll just set it to none default. Here we go. Now we have new client, and this is the number assigned to each client connection. Number assigned to we'll say to client 1. Well, couldn't we just cut this middleman out? Like, couldn't... Well... I was thinking, couldn't we just not have the client num 1 or 2? And then we would just use the logic to divide the client number. You feel what I'm saying here? So that you just wouldn't use this attribute client num 1 or 2 at all. We just use the client ID logic. Y'all feel what I'm saying here? And so let's just go down to where I'm talking about. Which is right here. Client num is equal to 1. Okay, yeah, I'm tripping. It's right here. So we would just, instead of saying if client num is equal to 1, we could just say if self.client num is equal to or we could do the modulus thing, just like we did to check if it's even or odd. So if it's an odd number, it's gonna be set to 1. If it's a odd number, or if it's an even number, it's gonna be set to 2. So we would say if self.client num, and we're gonna first say self.client num equals client num. Let me say if self client num, and this is just a placeholder until we convert the rest of the code associated with client num, etc. in the above functions. We're just gonna do, instead of this, we're gonna check for if self.client num modulus 2 is equal to 1, meaning if it has a remainder, it is an odd number, we assign client to, and then we'd have else. This would be, well, we'd still use else. We'd say else, which is if self-client num 2 is equal to 0. If it is an even number, we assign this to client number 2. So 1 would always be assigned to client 1, 2 would always be assigned to client 2, 3 would be assigned to client 1, 4 would be assigned to client 2, 5 would be assigned to client 1, 6 would be assigned to client 2, so on. Put being replaced by above line since self client. certain placement works. Okay, let's go back up here. If it's expand. Oops, I put that in the wrong spot actually. So yeah, we just cut out the need for whatchamacallit completely. Client no matter mod could use a function that converts, probably would use calculated property option, self client ID would be incremented and signed in, probably start accepting that. So there we go, we accomplished that with this. What we did was change 2 lines of code. We didn't even like add anything. And now we don't need a local, we don't need this local. Let's see. Client num 1 or 2, we don't need that. There we go. Which doesn't use self-client, I think it's an authority client. There we go. Okay. Alright, so yeah, there all we need to do now is add in this code right here. To change below line such that it accounts for client ID and game ID as one string of 10 bytes separated by a break character. There. Alright, and I gotta use the restroom. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Alright, so we add in code to change below line such that it accounts for client ID and game ID as one string of 10 bytes separated by a break character. Alright, so we already have this code in test reminders, don't we? No, not test reminders, we have it here. Here it is. Wait. Oh wait, no, this isn't right. It is in test reminders. Yeah, it was the methods, the 3 different methods that we tested, right? Yes, here it is. So there it is. Just copy it over here. Okay, adding code to change below line such that it counts for client ID, game ID as one string. So here we go. Let's give it a couple spaces to give it some room. So we need to convert the game ID and the client ID to string. So we'll say string client ID equals self dot client ID string of self client ID, and then we'll have string of game ID to the string of the game ID. Okay, then we get the length of the string client ID, and if that's equal to 1, we pad it with 4 zeros. Yeah, we already tested all this code, so this code is like already been vetted, and I think this should be right. The self client ID we assign way up at the top. Wait, client num equals client num. This should actually be self client ID. This should be changed, right? To be self client ID. I think that's the right way to do this. Yep, we need to change that. So this would be self client ID. Same here. Here. that's all good. So this should work fine. Give it the double stamp of approval. Okay, so now it needs to concatenate the strings. And we already know this is gonna be proper because I already checked it in the test file. Already tested this. We could put this in a function so we don't have to look at it. I think I will put that in a function. We would already have string client ID, break character, and then string game ID. String client ID, break character, and string game ID. Because it's already a string. And that's already a string, and that's already a string. Why would I have to convert it to a string again? Oh, it's already encoded, so we don't even need to encode it. Or we could just we could encode it like this. Do it in one line. Is UTF-8 the default? Yes, in Python 3, the default encoding for encode is UTF-8 if no encoding is specified. UTF-8 is standard encoding string for strings in Python 3. Okay. I mean, I feel like this should work. I mean, I'm pretty sure this would do the trick. I don't see anything that's missing. So you got 5 plus 1 is 6, and then 4, which is 10. There we go. I feel like this should work, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and test it. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we're gonna try. I feel like I probably forgot something, but maybe I didn't. Mm. Okay, here we go. We got our first bug here. Encoded, concatenated, client, in-game ID, decode. So where's this at? Unicode decode error, UTF-8 codec can't decode byte 0x80 in position 7, invalid start byte. Okay, so client side, network, get claim, client and game ID. So what's the problem here? Why is this grayed out? Oh, I changed the name, first of all. But it's throwing an error at line 56. It's saying it can't decode that. UTF-8 can't decode byte 0x80 in position 7. I'm pretty sure I got something wrong here. Yeah, so it's doing the same thing. It's getting stuck at line 56 and it's saying it can't decode this. Receive 10. So let's print what this is. What is the encoded? Let's print it. Oops. Okay, so it should have printed it. Let's see. Okay, so this is what we get. B204XXXX X80. What is going on? Why is it like this? Is it because of receive? Use this receive. Used in. What is this? The main receive function using client by. Is it calling this function? Let's see. Maybe it has something to do with that. But I thought. I don't think that would be the issue because I don't think we used that before. Yeah, we don't actually call that function or else it would get logged. And I don't see that log. So it's not calling that receive. So before we did receive 1 and then decoded it. And then an integer, turned it into an integer. So we're receiving. I'm confused here. Okay, I know what to do. I'm dumb. Let's see. Let's print it. So let's encode it first. Let's say encoded concatenated string equals concatenated string dot encode UTF-8. And then we're gonna send the. Oh, we don't have to turn it into a string. It's already a string. Maybe that's why. We don't have to encode it anymore. So we just have concatenated string, which is string client ID A, string game ID, encoded concatenated string, which is the concatenated string encoded in UTF-8. Then we do connection send, and you know what, we can div this. It's okay to div this. So we Why is this? I see what it did. Alright, there we go. So we have the concatenated string. And I'll just put a little note here that says what this section does. Pads the string client and string game ID to pads the string client ID and string game ID. Extend each to 5 and 4 digits respectively. Pads string client game ID with zeros, 5 and 4 characters. Okay. String equals string client ID plus A plus string game ID. Yeah, so it pads it. We know the padding system works correctly. We concatenate it as the string client ID, which is padded, plus the A plus the string game ID, which is properly padded to a string. Okay, and then we code it using concatenated string encode UTF-8. Send the encoded, but what we want to do first now is let's print encoded concatenated strings to see what we get. So let's run the server, let's run the client. So we still got the same error, but let's kill the server script so we can see what we got here. Okay, I don't see it. How about this? Let's do it again. Where is it? We're gonna do this. Do an F string. Coded concatenated string. And we'll say. So that we can easily see it. Now let's run the server and the clients. Kill the server script to get these logs. Oh, we shouldn't have to kill it to get a live log, right? Yeah, I'm dumb. We can leave it running, right? I mean, print. Yeah, that's for logging. It's not gonna print the logs because that's custom. But why doesn't it print it? Hmm. Is it not running? What is it? Did I put this in the wrong spot or something? No. Yeah, that's not the problem. Let's see. Yeah, we don't do any sending. This is the first send. The very first send is where? Right here. This right here. So why is it not printing? I'm confused. So it's sending this other stuff. Oh, here we go. Here's the problem. Okay. Here it is. Ah, I found. Okay, got it. Always look at your trace bag. Don't assume anything. I assumed that it was working up until that point, but oh, we actually have an issue prior. We got a prior issue here. Alright. So let's see what we got here. We have string game ID. Let's go to the very first one. So we're gonna go all the way to the top. Alright, yeah, we're starting from the top. Okay, so we got connected to client. Then we have a non-connection error, lost connection to client. And it gives us the stupid ass scroll wheel, jumps all over the place. It's a little bigger so I can see what the fuck I'm dealing with. There we go. Time of crash, so on and so forth, track. So in server at line 431, right here, right in front of our eyes, it's already there. It says string game ID equals string of self game ID. So then it goes to 871 and game ID, in game ID. Self game ID equals 1. For clients 1 and 2 only. Okay, that was a dumb comment, cause let me go change that. Defaults to clients 1 and 2 only. Alright, and then game ID of server has no setter. So it has to have a setter? Oh, because we're trying to set it. Oh, duh. So yeah, because we set it. Well, this is the getter. Yeah, I'm dumb. We would just say return 1. I'm an idiot, sorry. This should be return 1. That's why. It was silly goose. So we need to use an internal form of it. Say return 1 and then else, and we just call this the game ID plus equals 1. Well, no, because it has to be stored. You feel what I'm saying here, bro? it has to be, game ID has to be stored. Well, no, it doesn't. Because game ID is merely derived from, well, that means we would have to add in an extra calculation. We would have to like divide it by 2 or something. Because we wouldn't be merely incrementing game ID and then returning it. We would actually be we would have to calculate what the game ID would be based off of the client ID number. So like we would have to put that in mathematical language, which would be not super hard, right? It would be so client ID would be like divided by 2. Yeah, if we had client ID is less than 3, game ID would always be 1. If client ID was greater than 3 or equal to 3, we would say 3 divided by 2 well, then we would round down. And I think that's silly. Like we can just save the game ID. We can just have a setter or we can have a setter for it. And we would have an internal value underscore game ID. Right? So whenever we call this using the property to get it, it would access the current value of game ID and set game ID based on the calculation made. Granted that the client ID was over 3. If the client ID was over 3, then we would say if self client ID is, or if it's an odd number, then we would increment the game ID. And this would call the setter right here. And the setter would increment the internal value. Baby, y'all feel? So let's I love that, dude. That's smooth as butter, dude. Whoever made that, cozy, smooth as butter, dog. So then we would say add game ID setter, and then we would take self val, and we'll just say self dot underscore game ID equals val. And then okay, so this would circularly call itself right here. This would call the getter again. So what we need to do is so yeah, this is fine. When we call this, it's gonna set the internal. And then else whenever the client num is greater than 3, it's gonna use the setter and the getter. Shit, man, this is, hold up, this is not gonna work. This is circular. No, we get the internal. See how it's not that complicated, bro. It's not, but it is. You understand? It's simple, so simple, but not. I gotta zoom out here. Let me just think outside of the box. What are we trying to accomplish here? All we need, just think simple, man. All we need is the getter. When we get the game ID, we want it to automatically calculate itself based off of the client ID. It's that simple. So in the case, let's break this up into two problems. In the case that client ID is less than 3, we would just return 1. Because we're getting the game ID. The whole point of this getter is to get the ID, and when the ID is less than 3, we return 1. Now else, if the self client ID is equal to or greater than 3, then we check to see if it's an odd or even number. If it's an odd number, then we want to increment the game ID. So we want to do, let's rewrite this, game ID plus 1, and then we want to do, or we'll say game ID equals game ID plus 1. And then we want to return the game ID. Okay, simple. But the issue is we have to get the stored game ID. Like, we have to have it stored somewhere. And since this is the getter, we can't refer back to ourselves, because that would be recursive. It would just keep referring back to itself in an infinite loop. What we need to do is reference the internal value. So then we would say game ID equals self underscore game ID plus 1. But that's not going to work either, because we're never actually setting the internal game ID. We need to actually set I mean, couldn't we just set the internal game ID? Create an internal use, or we could just have the setter. This is fine. We could just say self.gameID equals, which this calls the setter, and then it would refer to the internal use game ID. And whenever we set the internal use game ID. For the first time, it's gonna go here and it's gonna assign it. So we would have to defaultly set the internal to be 1, so that the first time this got ran, whenever client num was equal to 3, game ID would be set to internal of 1 plus 1. So that means we wouldn't recursively access the getter because we're accessing the internal, and this wouldn't access recursively the getter. It would access the setter, which would first calculate 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then it would go into the setter and pass 2 to val, and then it would set the internal game ID equal to 2. So the next time we called it, and when client num was 4, it would go if self client ID, well, it wouldn't enter into that clause at all. But then when it entered into it for client ID 5, it would enter in and say game ID equals self underscore game ID, which would be 2, plus 1, which would be 3. And then it would pass 3 as val to the setter, and that would set the internal. So this is the correct format. But we still have to return, because this is the getter, we have to return the value. So we couldn't return self game ID because that would recursively call the setter or the getter. We would have to return the internal, because at that point the internal will have been changed by the setter. So at this point in time, when we returned the internal, it would be equal to whatever this setter set it to, because the setter runs first, then the getter accesses the new value that was just set. And that is kind of confusing, I'm not gonna lie. It's not, but it is. Like, it's kind of like, what the fuck is going on here? But then when you understand it, it's like, oh, okay, that's really not complicated. It's just kind of oddly worded. So what we need to do is create the internal. We can close this. Close that some more. Collapse it some more. We'll go all the way up here to this is the internal, so it would be underscore. Underscore would be last in line, right? In alphabetical, I think. But we would want to put it next to no, we'll put it at the bottom. Yeah, like this. So self game ID, would default to none, must be defaultly set to 1 to work properly with the associated properties getter method, whatever you call it. Getter setter methods. Baby. Alright, there we go. So comment created 122 25 type. This is just going to be integer purpose internal use value for associated ID setter getter. part of my property. Yeah, okay. So I think that should have fixed it. Let's try this real quick. And I gotta piss again. There it goes. It's working, I think. Yep, there it goes. Look at that. Cool. Okay. So, I mean, at least it's working to a degree. So we did fix it. We just have to figure out what's the next problem because it's hung up somewhere. Okay, so cool. We did that. I'm gonna take a little break here. I'm gonna come back and we'll do a third session. So let's put our time. It's 2:23. So we continue working on finishing it and game declining activation. Same thing. Added time 108 to. So far we've done an hour and a half plus an hour and 15, so we've done 2.75. I'm gonna come back and do one more session. We'll do the round 3 for the day, and that'll probably be it. So yeah, I'm trying to get back up to that closer to the 4-hour mark. I'm trying to knock this shit out, man, so I can move on, because I got fatigue over this project. Big fatigue over this project. But we're getting there, right? So see you.